It's the beginning with Genesis 1:1. First, this. God created the heavens and earth. All you see, all you don't see. Earth was a soup of nothingness, a bottomless emptiness, an inky blackness. God's spirit brooded like a bird above the watery abyss. God spoke, "Light," and light appeared. God saw that light was good and separated light from dark. God named the light day. God named the dark night. It was evening, it was morning, day one. God spoke, "Sky." In the middle of the waters, separate water from water. God made sky. God separated the water under sky from the water above sky, and there it was. God named sky the heavens. It was evening, it was morning, day two. God spoke, "Separate water beneath heaven, gather into one place, land appear." And there it was. God named the land earth. God named the pooled water ocean, and God saw that it was good. God spoke, "Earth, green up, grow all varieties of seed-bearing plants, every sort of fruit-bearing tree." And there it was. Earth produced green seed-bearing plants, all varieties, and fruit-bearing trees of all sorts. God saw that it was good. It was evening, it was morning, day three. God spoke, "Lights, come out, shine in heaven's sky. Separate day from night. Mark seasons and days and years. Lights in heaven's sky to give light to earth." And there it was. God made two big lights, the larger to take charge of day, the smaller to be in charge of night. And God made the stars. God placed them in the heavenly sky to light up earth and oversee day and night, to separate light and dark. God saw that it was good. It was evening, it was morning, day four. God spoke, "Swarm, ocean, with fish and all sea life. Birds fly through the sky over earth." God created the huge whales, all the swarm of life in the waters, and every kind and species of flying birds. God saw that it was good. God blessed them. "Prosper, reproduce, fill oceans, birds reproduce on earth." It was evening, it was morning, day five. God spoke, "Earth, generate life, every sort and kind, cattle and reptiles and wild animals, all kinds." And there it was, wild animals of every kind, cattle of all kinds, every sort of reptile and bug. God saw that it was good. God spoke, "Let us make human beings in our image, make them reflecting our nature, so they can be responsible for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle, and yes, earth itself, and every animal that moves on the face of earth." God created human beings. God created them godlike, reflecting God's nature. God created them male and female, and blessed them. "Prosper, reproduce, fill earth, take charge, be responsible for fish in the sea and birds in the air, for every living thing that moves on the face of the earth." Then God said, "I've given you every sort of seed-bearing plant on earth, and every kind of fruit-bearing tree, given them to you for food. To all animals and all birds, everything that moves and breathes, I give whatever grows out of the ground for food." And there it was. God looked over everything that was made. It was so very good. It was so very good. It was evening, and it was morning, day six. Heaven and earth were finished, down to the last detail. By the seventh day, God had finished the work. On the seventh day, God rested from all this work. God blessed the seventh day and made it a holy day, because on that day God rested from God's work, all the creating God had done. This is a story of how it all started, of heaven and earth when they were created.
Oh, that is good.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
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 Well, the title of the message today is Awe and Wonder. And I used Brian McLaren's book, We Make the Road by Walking, as sort of a basis of the message. So I don't know if you're familiar with Brian McLaren, but I enjoy his writings a lot. Why do readers read and travelers travel? Why do thinkers think and dancers dance? Why do chefs cook, foodies eat, farmers till, and drummers riff? Runners run, photographers shoot. Why? Why? Could it be a quest for aliveness, a desire to thrive, to walk tall, to breathe free, be less lonely, less exhausted, less conflicted, and less afraid? Zoane Aeoian, it's a Greek term in the New Testament, and it's often translated in English as eternal life. Sadly, that translation suggests life after death to most people, and it's equated with going to heaven rather than hell. The term, though, literally means life of all ages and could be understood as life in this present age or life in the contemporary culture. It's all about now and not the future. This makes me remember of a gentleman that was at the Matfield Green Church when I served up there for 7 years. When he first started coming, he was so afraid of dying and going to hell. And by the time I left, he came up to me and he said, "Billie, I'm not afraid of hell. I recognize that I need to live life today and not worry about what's after life." And I was so thrilled that he was able to make that move. Brian McLaren, in his book, We Make the Road by Walking, believes that true aliveness is a good contemporary translation of this term, Zoane Aeoian. He suggests that this quest for aliveness may be the best thing about religion. It's what we're hoping for when we pray. It's the reason we gather, we celebrate, eat, fast, sing, and contemplate. When folks say, "I'm spiritual," are they claiming I'm seeking aliveness? I hope so. It's true that we have children and grandchildren in this day and age who are not involved with religion, faith, or God in any way, at least as we understand them. On some level, though, folks in the church are realizing that religion often shrinks, starves, cages, and even freezes aliveness rather than fostering it. The greatest viable hope for the future of religion is to befriend aliveness. One of the best ways I know to become alive in our faith is to better understand what it's all about. To look to the scriptures, to tell the stories that enhance our learning and our hearing of the biblical stories, to connect our own lives with the biblical stories. None of us in this room is finished yet. We all have the capacity to learn, to mature, to think, to change, and to grow. We also have the freedom to stagnate, regress, constrict, and lose our way. And we get to choose what we do. There's a growing number of people who believe that we are in the early stages of a new movement, an emerging movement that pulses with danger and promise. Everything we know and believe about our spiritual traditions will be challenged. The challenge may create negativity and reactivity, the tightening of angry fists. Other folks will respond positively and constructively, opening their extended arms. This makes me think of a book I read years ago called Sacred Eyes. I can't remember the author's name. He was a former United Methodist pastor, but he was looking out at the world with sacred eyes, and he saw creation, all of creation, in 3 stages, much like humans have childhood, teenage years, and adulthood. And he saw it as childhood is the growth stage, being connected to mother, learning how to do things, learning to walk and talk and be, but very connected to the mother. And then the teenage rebellion years, where we start to revolt against what we've been taught. We try to do it our way. And that's been a time in history of war and revolt, uprisings. We're still sort of kind of in the midst of that. But then there's this adulthood, or the spiritual growth part of creation as well as humanity or creation. And it's where we turn back to our roots. This author talks about it being mother, reconnecting with the mother in a new way, understanding the gentleness, the peacefulness of what mother wanted and wants for us. And I think that what McLaren was talking about in his book about early stages of a new movement, I think this started, I want to say, as early as the 50s. It got kind of like waylaid through the women's movement and the civil rights movement, because there was a lot of uprising in that. And I think we're not through our teenage rebellion years quite, but we're on the edge of maturity. For those who choose this challenge in a positive way, there's going to be new possibilities to explore, unfulfilled potential to develop, new ways to bless, inspire, and enliven. Faith was never intended to be a destination, a status, a holding tank, or a warehouse. Instead, our Christian faith began as the way, a road, a path, a way out of the old and destructive patterns into life in a new way, in creative ways of being. I think about Pastor John in Salina. When I first stepped into the Christian faith, I visited with pastors in different churches, and Pastor John talked about, John had been a pastor for probably 20 or 25 years by then, grew up in the Christian faith, and yet he said he didn't become a Christian, that he's still becoming a Christian, because there's still places to learn, to grow, to mature in the Christian faith. Brian McLaren says, if a community only points back to where it's been, or if it only digs in its heels where it is now, it is more like a dead end or a parking lot, not a way or a road. Before Christianity became a rich and powerful religion, before it was associated with buildings and budgets, crusades and colonialism or televangelism, Christianity began as a revolutionary, nonviolent movement, promoting a new kind of aliveness on the margins of society. It dared to honor children and women and unmarried adults in a world ruled by married men. It challenged slave masters to free their slaves and see them as peers. It defied religious taboos that divided people into us and them, in and out, good and evil, clean and unclean. It claimed that everyone, not just the elite few, had God-given talents to use for the common good. It exposed a system based on domination, privilege, and violence, and proclaimed instead a vision of mutual service, mutual responsibility, and peaceable neighborliness. It put people above profit and made the audacious claim that the earth belonged not to rich tycoons or powerful politicians. Doesn't this sound familiar?
Oh my goodness.
But to the Creator who loves every sparrow in the trees and every wildflower in the meadow. It was a peace movement, a love movement, a joy movement, a justice movement, an integrity movement, and a liveness movement. So this morning, we're beginning where the Bible starts in Genesis with, in the beginning. In the beginning. So let's start with an understanding that from the Hopi to the Babylonians, from Aztecs to Australian Aboriginals, from the Vikings in Europe to the Han in China, to the Yoruba in Africa to the ancient Hebrews of the Middle East, all human tribes have developed, adapted, and told powerful creation stories to provide their best answers to key questions that we all have. Questions like, why are we here? What's wrong in the world? What's our role, our task, our purpose? What is a good life? Is there meaning and hope? What dangers must we guard against? What treasures must we seek? The language of these creation narratives often sounds strange to us. Their assumptions are foreign to us. But if we listen carefully, mixing their ancient wisdom with our own, we can be more fully alive in our own time. With that, we turn to the creation narratives now of the ancient Hebrews. I'm going to share messages today and next week about the 2 creation stories in Genesis. And I invite you to listen closely, to take notes of things that might be new to you, to be aware of what thoughts and feelings come up for you as you hear a different take on these Genesis stories. I even have a list of questions on the back side of your bulletin for you to consider over this next week. You might pay attention. God might have something to say to you. I'm going to read those questions. Okay, first of all, what one thought or idea caught your attention, provoked, disturbed, challenged, encouraged, warmed, warned, helped, or surprised you? Remember a time when you felt a humble awe or joyful wonder. I invite you to do that this week. I remember sitting at a stream in Colorado at the, I can't think of the name of it. It was a Mennonite Christian camp. And it was 5:30 in the morning, and I don't do 5:30 very well. But I was up, sitting by this stream. Nobody else was up yet. And a little hummingbird came and took a bath in the stream right next to me. And that's been 30 years ago, maybe 35, but I remember the awe and the wonder of seeing that. What's the most beautiful place you've ever seen, and what was special about it? Oftentimes, those beautiful places are not human-made, but looking off the top of a mountain or down a valley or those God-made places. This week, choose one facet of creation that you love. Birds, trees, weather, soil, water, light, children, aging, sleep. Observe it, think about it, learn about it every chance you can with this question in mind. If that element of creation was your only Bible, what would it tell you about God? And lastly, you're invited to meditate. Observe a few moments of silence. Let a silent prayer of gratitude arise within you. You might do that every day. You might do it once this week. When you think of it, whatever. But I invite you to be aware of these questions. God might have something to say to you. We've heard the first creation story in Genesis this morning. Did you know there were 2 creation stories in the Bible? That the first chapter is one creation story, and the second chapter is the second story, and I'll talk about it next week. Dinosaurs aren't boring. Coral reefs aren't boring. Elephants aren't boring. Hummingbirds aren't boring. Neither are little kids. Evolution isn't boring. Magnetism and electricity aren't boring. Even glaciers aren't boring, though their slow pace is hard for us to perceive. And God must not be boring either, because God's creation is so amazingly, wonderfully, surprisingly fascinating. The first and greatest surprise, a miracle really, is this, that anything exists at all, and that we get to be a part of it. Ripe peaches in this fall season, crisp apples, pungent cantaloupes, tall mountains, bright leaves, sparkling waters, flying flocks, flickering flames, and you and me here and now. The first page of the Bible and the best thinking of today's scientists fully agree that it all began in the beginning, when space and time, energy and matter, gravity and light all burst or bloomed or banged into being. In light of the Genesis story, we would say that the possibility of this universe came into being because the creative spirit called God uttered the invitation, "Let it be. Let there be light. Let there be a dome and waters. Let there be light. And there was light, time, matter, motion, sea, stone, fish, sparrow, you, me, enjoying the unspeakable gift and privilege of being here and being alive." In the Hebrew tradition, Biblical scholars understand that first creation story, Genesis 1:1 to 2:4, as beautiful poetry, explaining how the world came into being. It was never intended within the Hebrew context to be a literal explanation of the creation of the world. I invite you to read this passage with a poet's enthusiasm and see how it feels to speak of the creation. Don't we all feel like poets when we try to speak of the beauty and the wonder of creation? Don't we share a common amazement when we truly stop and try to fathom or explain our cosmic neighborhood? I think of some of the pictures I see on the internet, specifically on Facebook, of outer space. I posted a picture today of lightning hitting the ground, and it looked like a body with two arms with crutches. It was incredible. If you're on Facebook, check my page. It's up at the top somewhere. There are just incredible, amazing things. Even my sharing that with you is nothing like actually looking at the picture of it. I spoke earlier of aliveness. To be alive is to look up at the stars on a dark night and feel the beyond words awe of space in all its vastness. To be alive is to look down from a mountaintop on a bright, clear day and feel the wonder that can only be expressed with an "oh," or "wow," or maybe even "hallelujah." To be alive is to look from the beach to the horizon at a sunrise or sunset and savor the joy of the sky colors in all of its glory. To be alive is to gaze in delight at a single bird or a tree or a leaf. I remember walking down the road near Matfield Green where I lived at the retreat center, and it was in August, and all the trees along the road, because we were near a creek, that's why there were trees out there, because I was in the tall grass prairie, but all the trees had green leaves, except I looked up and there was one red leaf up in the middle of a tree. Caught my attention, and I wondered why, and just was aware of how awesome it was to see that one red leaf in August of all times. To be alive is to gaze in delight at a single bird, a tree, a leaf, a friend, and feel that they each whisper of a creator that we all share. McLaren says, if one were to ask what language the creator speaks, the best answer is clear water, deep sky, red squirrel, blue whale, gray parrot, green lizard, golden aspen, orange mango, laughing child, rolling rivers, serene forests, churning storm, spinning planet. Some say the first Bible God provided humans was nature, that in looking to nature we can more fully understand that God is real, that creation happened, and it is wonderful. Genesis tells us that the universe is good, a truth so important it gets repeated like the theme of a song. Rocks are good, clouds are good, sweet corn is good, every river, hill, valley, and forest is good. Skin, good. Tattooed skin, good. Bone, good. Eating and breathing, giving birth and growing old, good, good, good. All are good. Life is good. The best thing in Genesis is not simply human beings. The whole of creation is considered good and is enjoyed together. The poetry of Genesis describes the very goodness that comes at the end of a long process of creation, when all the parts, including us, are working together as one whole. The harmonious whole is so good that the Creator takes a day off to enjoy it. Hopefully, that day of restful enjoyment tells us that the purpose of existence is not money or power or fame or security or anything less than to participate in the goodness and beauty and aliveness of creation. Awe and wonder. We walk this road to behold the wonder and to savor the awesomeness of life and the living of it. We stop to remind ourselves of who we are, whose we are, what's going on here, and how beautiful, precious, holy, and meaningful it all is. We pause on the journey with thankful hearts, rejoicing to be a part of this beautiful and good creation. This is what it means to be alive. Amen. Amen.